we had 650 rounds of ammunition for 650 calibers, and then you had 8 rockets under the wings and 2 500-pound bombs and a 150-gallon belly tank. So you had 400 gallons to do 4 or 5 hours. The least I ever got down on fuel consumption was 56 gallons an hour, and you can't do that in combat.
So your goal was to just look for Japanese every single time you went out?
We'd have a target, either a factory or an airstrip or anti-aircraft positions. And of course we'd always try and find something like a troop movement or a train. It's sort of fun to shoot up trains.
Where would the Yorktown be stationed at this point? Just kind of off the coast of Japan?
No, he'd be 200 to 300 miles away.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you were covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if it was ground.
Well, I guess covering the water.
Yeah, there's plenty of water out there, and it all looks alike.
So was the Yorktown usually around Japan, or did you go to some of the islands sometimes?
We came on in the Philippines at Lady Gulf, and we went through the Philippines and then up to Formosa and over to China and over to French Indochina, and then at Okinawa and Iwo, and then ultimately to Japan, Tokyo.
So you saw a lot then.
We thought so.
So what was your favorite part about being on board the Yorktown?
Eating and sleeping.
Okay, so what was it? So when you weren't flying, what were you doing on board?
We had no duties aboard, absolutely. Pilots are useless on board otherwise. But no, you had the library to read, and of course there wasn't TV back then. There wasn't air conditioning. You had a circulating fan like everybody else at home. It was fastened to the wall, and it was running when I moved in my stateroom, and it was still running when I left.
So you could kind of do whatever you wanted when you weren't flying?
Yeah, the majority of the time you'd be up there watching the takeoffs and be up there when they came back to watch the landings. It's a never-ending process, and of course you want to make sure that everybody came back and made it. And if there's a crack up, well, you want to see it, not to see if somebody's hurt, but you like to be there.
How many pilots were in your air group total?
We had 105 in the fighter squadron. There were air group, you had bombers, torpedoes, and fighters, and then they divided the fighters into fighters and fighter bombers. Of course, the duties were similar, but they just broke up the size, and we all flew the same airplanes. It probably 300, 350 total.
And on board at one time, there were that many?
One time, the air group.
And what were you?
Pardon?
Were you the fighter group?
I was fighters, yes, and I stayed fighters. And as I say, that before they broke us up, we had 105 pilots. Well, when they broke us up, about half of that.
Wow. So did all y'all have the same berthing compartment, or were you separate?
junior officers, which would be ensigns and lieutenant JGs, were in a bunk room, and then I was a senior lieutenant, and us and on up, we had a stateroom, and there were 3 of us in our stateroom. We were all lieutenants. We had quite a few lieutenants in the squadron. And of course your skipper is a lieutenant commander, and the executive officer usually a lieutenant commander also, but junior to the other one, or a very senior lieutenant.
What are some things that particularly stick out to you about your time aboard the Yorktown?
Oh, it was sort of boring in part, and when you don't have anything to do but eat and sleep and go to the library, and of course the guys who like to play poker and shoot craps, why, you could be watching that or participating in it. We did have a supply of alcohol, which was verboten. You weren't supposed to have it, but it came aboard as radio gear, and of course we knew where it was.
So, how about any major battles or military advances? Is there one that really sticks out to you?
Well, covering the invasion of Evo was probably the worst thing we did, primarily because the weather was bad. It was around, as I recall, 2,500 or 3,000 foot ceiling cover, and of course the enemy knew that, and they were laying their anti-aircraft up to that level, and it made it easier for them. All they had to do was be right on, and we had a lot of anti-aircraft bursts that close but not close enough, and it'll rock the airplane, and of course you feel the debris flying by you, and hopefully, and occasionally through the wings or dent the fuselage, and that's the only place I remember us using napalm. The enemy was in caves and that, and we'd put the napalm in the cave, and that fire just goes like that through the channels.
So your main mission there was to cover the air while the Army was invading Iwo Jima?
The Army and the Marines coming in the landing craft, and there were 6,000 men killed in one day. The beach was pretty littered.
And you could see it from the air?
Oh, you could see it, yeah. Yeah.
So if you were engaged in such a big battle like that, would your shift be longer? Would you stay out in the plane as long as you could without running out of fuel?
No, your time is set before you take off, and you return.
Okay. So you knew how long you'd be out there
Right.
for, and then you'd have to come back to the
Right.
Yorktown.
Usually, the more you're engaged, why, the more fuel you use, and of course you got to have a reserve for coming back. And the least I ever landed aboard was 6 gallons, and 6 gallons would not take you around for another landing. So you make good landings when you come back.
Gosh. Do you remember being particularly scared during that time or any other time you were engaged with the enemy?
I think you stay scared. Yeah.
But your adrenaline's
Yeah.
probably going pretty
Yeah.
quick.
That cold sweat runs down your back. And when we were over Japan, my wingman and I sighted an airplane on my tail, and about the same time the tracers start flying by, and we would fly out from each other so we could turn and look behind and protect if necessary, and then we'd, like a scissors, just do that back and forth. And when I had those tracers flying by, I felt something run down my back, and I thought, gee, I've been hit and it doesn't hurt, you know. And I couldn't believe it. Another trickle went down, and I reached back and I wiped as much as I could and brought it in perspiration, soaking wet.
So you thought it was blood.
Yeah. If it was blood, as I say, it didn't hurt.
Oh.
Which I was glad to see it wasn't blood.
So would you say for the majority of the time you were engaging with the enemy, or were you doing some training and scouting out most of the time?
No, once we got there, we never did additional training. You didn't have time for that, and you didn't fly, particularly when you're away from the target. Mm-hmm. And every day you were going somewhere, somebody. And,
So how long were you aboard the Yorktown?
September to last of February, 44 and 5.
Okay, so almost 2 full years.
Well, no, that would be probably 8 months.
Okay. So can you think of anything else that really sticks out to you about something that happened while you were on board? Whether it's a memorable moment because of the war or like a funny story, anything you can think of while on board?
Well, there weren't many funny stories when you were on board, but the crashes sort of stick out. Somebody comes aboard and he's too fast, and he just floats and misses all the wires, and misses the barriers, goes over and lands on top of the guy that landed before him, and you know, it killed 2 or 3 people like that, tear up 2 or 3 airplanes, and those stick out to you. Somebody comes in too slow or wrong position, takes a wave off, pours the coal to it, and turns to make room for the one coming up behind him. And if he turns too much and puts on too much throttle, he doesn't straighten out, he just peels over into the water, and hopefully they pull him out, but the airplane sinks in 15 seconds, and a lot of times they don't get him.
Did that happen often?
Well, once is too often.
Well, I agree.
But no, fortunately it didn't happen often, but when it did, it was usually severe. Or somebody take off and didn't have enough speed and just go in, and of course ship runs right over it.
Oh, goodness. Well, did you enjoy your time aboard?
I think so. Yeah, it is an education. Time goes slow sometimes, goes fast others. I don't think any of these guys that are here today would take $1 million for it. Wouldn't give 10 cents to do it again.
Gotcha. Well, after you finished that cruise, where did you go?
I got 30 days leave, and then I got orders to reform with the squadron, and we went to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I don't believe there was one other guy from the BF3 squadron besides myself. There were other people that had been out there in other squadrons, and then of course the ones who had never been out. We trained there for some time and then got moved to Oceana, Virginia, and we were there when war ended in August, I think, 15th was it? And,
When the bombs were dropped
Yeah,
in
I
Japan,
think,
something
yeah.
like that.
and I went home, and I missed flying, so I went back in the reserve, and I flew out of Glenview for 10 years.
So did you know you wouldn't be going back to the Yorktown after that
Oh
cruise?
yeah, I didn't know
Okay.
where, if we completed our reforming of 3, chances are we would not be on the Yorktown, or we'd be perhaps some other carrier.